There is a single quote from the Buddha that completely changed the way I see life. Not because it was poetic, not because it promised miracles, but because it pierced straight through the quiet suffering I had carried for years, suffering I couldn't name, and yet had learned to live with as if it were part of who I was. If you have ever felt adrift in the sea of expectations, torn between what you want and what you think you should want, or haunted by a restlessness that follows you into even your quietest moments, then this teaching may touch something deep inside you, just as it did for me. So I invite you to stay. Do not rush to find the quote. Do not skip ahead looking for the answer. Because the truth is, the quote alone is not what transforms us. The true gift lies in the journey of understanding it. And that is the path I hope to walk with you today. Before I encountered that one Buddhist quote, I lived much like a leaf blown about by the winds of expectation, never grounded, never still. I remember a time in my life that now feels like a half-forgotten dream, yet it shaped the way I breathed, the way I thought, the way I suffered. On the outside, everything appeared to be in place: a job that looked respectable, relationships that seemed functional, even moments of laughter that could convince others I was fine. But inside, I was drowning in a quiet kind of emptiness. Each morning, I would rise with a weight of comparison sitting on my chest. I would scroll through the lives of others, through images curated to show only their light, and think to myself, why not me? Why am I always behind? I chased validation like a beggar chasing crumbs, measuring my worth through achievements, through numbers, through how others perceive me. But no matter how much I collected praise, progress, approval, there was always this nagging sense that something was missing. Something essential. Something real. In truth, I wasn't living. I was performing. And in that performance, I had forgotten who I truly was. I wore masks to please, to belong, to succeed. I bent myself to fit expectations I never chose, goals I never questioned, values that were handed to me but never felt like mine. I felt like a guest in my own life, watching it unfold as if I were just a spectator, never the author. It is said in the Dhammapada, the mind, when shaped by craving, leads us again and again into suffering. And now I see how my own mind, restless and untrained, dragged me into an endless cycle of wanting and lacking, of pretending and regretting. I thought I needed more to be happy. But what I truly lacked was presence. I was always somewhere else, mentally in the future, emotionally stuck in the past, never fully here. You see, it wasn't the world that was unkind. It was my own clinging to illusions that made life feel unbearable. I had mistaken ambition for purpose, applause for love, busyness for meaning. And yet, beneath all of that noise, there was a quiet voice, an intuition that whispered, "This isn't it. There must be something more honest, more peaceful than this." It wasn't until I came across that one teaching from the Buddha that I began to awaken from this trance. But before we go there, we must understand, suffering often arises not because the world is cruel, but because we have forgotten who we truly are in it. And in forgetting, we suffer. But life, in its mysterious compassion, has a way of placing the right words before us when we are most ready to hear them. One evening, while sitting alone in a quiet corner of a temple library, I found an old, weathered book of Buddhist teachings. The scent of aged paper filled the air. I wasn't searching for anything in particular, perhaps just a moment of stillness in the chaos of my thoughts. As I opened the book at random, my eyes fell upon a single sentence. Attachment is the root of suffering. The Buddha. At first, I passed over it lightly. I had heard it before, perhaps in quotes shared on social media or spoken in passing by teachers. It sounded poetic, simple, even. But not profound. Not yet. I turned the page, then paused, and returned to that line again. Something within me wouldn't let it go. The words began to echo. Not just in my mind, but in my chest, where all the unspoken tensions of my life were stored. What does it really mean, attachment? I sat with that question. And slowly, I began to see. Attachment was not just romantic longing. It was not limited to clinging to people or possessions. It was far more subtle. more pervasive. It was in the way I tied my happiness to success. It was in the way I held onto old narratives of who I thought I should be. It was in my need to be understood, to be admired, to be right. It was in my fear of uncertainty, my resistance to impermanence, my hunger for control. The more I looked, the more I realized attachment was the thread running through every sorrow I had ever felt. When I didn't get what I wanted, I suffered. When I did get what I wanted but feared losing it, I suffered. Even when everything seemed fine, the mind created new cravings, new expectations, new attachments to guard and protect. And so the suffering continued. The Buddha was not offering a moral judgment. He wasn't condemning desire out of cruelty or austerity. He was describing reality as it is. That which you cling to will become the source of your fear. That single sentence began to reshape my perception of everything. I began to see that suffering doesn't arise because the world refuses to meet our needs. It arises because we refuse to let go of meeting the world to be a certain way. In that moment of quiet realization, the quote became more than words. It became a mirror. It showed me all the ways I had been trying to bend life to my will, rather than opening my heart to life as it is. And it was then that I understood, the path to peace is not paved by acquiring more but by releasing more. Not by holding tighter but by loosening the grip. The quote had not changed. I had. From that night onward, the quote stayed with me not as a mantra to repeat, but as a lens through which to observe the world, and more importantly, myself. Wherever I turned my attention, I began to see the fingerprints of attachment. In my thoughts, in my habits, in my reactions. I noticed how even the smallest discomfort, irritation at a delayed reply, the subtle jealousy when someone else succeeded, the frustration when plans didn't unfold as I expected, all of it had a common root. I wanted reality to match my desire, and when it didn't, I resisted. I suffered. But now, with that awareness, something profound began to shift. I no longer reacted blindly. I began to observe my mind instead of obeying it. When a wave of emotion rose, anger, fear, longing, I would pause and ask, what am I clinging to right now? Sometimes that was the need to be liked. Other times, it was the illusion of certainty, or the craving for control. Simply recognizing the attachment underneath the suffering was like opening a window in a dark room. The air changed. Light entered. This was not an overnight transformation. It was then still as day practice. But every time I caught myself in the grip of attachment and gently released it, I tasted something that had once eluded me: freedom. Real freedom. Not the kind the world sells, thus freedom to choose, to own, to escape, but the deeper kind. The freedom to be at peace regardless of outcome. The freedom to remain whole even when things fall apart. The freedom to love without needing to possess. To serve without expecting reward. To walk through life gently, without dragging the heavy chains of must have, should be, why not me? There is a teaching in the Majjhima Nikaya where the Buddha says, just as a lotus is born in water, grows in water, and yet rises above the water to stand on soil, so too does the awakened one live in the world but is not entangled by it. This, I began to understand, is the fruit of seeing through attachment. It's not about renouncing life, it's about no longer being imprisoned by it. You can still love, still dream, still build and create and hope. But you do it with an open hand, not a clenched fist. And in that space of openness, life becomes softer. People become easier to forgive. Setbacks become teachers. Even pain becomes the doorway because you no longer see it as punishment, but as part of the dance of impermanence. Yes, that one Buddhist quote changed my life. But the change was not in the world around me. It was in the way I saw it. And that has made all the difference. So how does one truly live this wisdom? Not just understand it in words, but embody it in the silence between thoughts and the stillness within a storm. For me, it began with small, almost invisible choices. Each morning, before the world could place its demands upon me, I wouldn't sit. Just sit. No grand rituals. No striving for enlightenment. Just the breath, rising, falling, like waves meeting the shore. And in that stillness, I would gently observe, what am I carrying into this day? Is there a fear I'm gripping? A hope I'm clinging to too tightly? Meditation, I found, was not about escaping the world. It was about sharpening the awareness that allows you to move through the world without being consumed by it. I did not need to retreat to a mountain or shave my head. I needed to become honest with my own mind. Throughout the day, I practiced something very simple but deeply transformative. I would pause. In the middle of a conversation, in traffic, in moments of stress or temptation, I would pause and silently ask, am I attached right now? To being right? To being in control? To being understood? And if the answer was yes, I did not scold myself. I simply noticed. Because awareness itself is a kind of letting go. I also began to simplify. Fewer desires. Fewer distractions. I stopped chasing experiences for the sake of proving something to myself or to others. I let go of the need to be constantly productive, constantly validated. I started to walk slower, eat slower, speak less, listen more. You see, attachment thrives in speed and noise. But presence blooms in stillness. One of the most profound daily practices I discovered was accepting things as they are without rushing to change or fix them. Whether it was a delayed plan, a harsh word, or a painful memory, I would breathe into it, hold it lightly, and say, this, too, belongs. It is not passive resignation. It is spiritual strength, the kind that allows you to remain rooted when everything around you sways. And when emotions came, as they still do, I would let them arise like clouds in a vast sky. I no longer feared sadness or anger, because I no longer mistook them for who I am. I knew they were visitors, not residents. This is anger, I would whisper. I see you. And I let you pass. In time, what once seemed like discipline became devotion. Not to a doctrine, but to a way of being free, present, awake. And that, I believe, is the heart of the Buddhist teaching. Not to transcend this life, but to live it so deeply, so openly, that nothing can bind you, not even the fear of loss. Letting go, then, is not a moment. It is a daily practice. A sacred remembering that you are not what you possess, not what you achieve, not even what others think of you. You are the awareness beneath it all. And that cannot be broken. The greatest lesson I have learned through this journey is something the world rarely teaches, thus yet the Dharma whispers that in every breath, every falling leaf, every moment we dare to be still, it is not the circumstances of life that make us suffer, but the way we hold them in our hearts. For so long, I believed that peace would arrive when the world finally arranged itself to my liking. If I could just succeed more, be seen more, be loved more, then the restlessness inside me would fade. But that peace never came. Because what I was truly seeking was not a different life, it was a different relationship with life. When I began to loosen the tight knots of attachment, when I started letting go of the need to control, to compare, to cling, I noticed something profound. I began to see things as they really are. Not through the fog of desire or fear, but with a clarity that only acceptance can bring. Letting go didn't make me indifferent. It made me deeply aware. I could see impermanence not as a threat, but as a gentle teacher. I could face uncertainty not with panic, but with presence. Letting go did not make me love less. It made me love more purely. I no longer love with a hidden agenda or the unspoken need to be loved in return. I love because loving itself was freedom. As one teaching says so beautifully, when you let go, you are free. When you are free, you can love without fear. In releasing the grip of expectation, I began to feel lighter. I no longer needed to possess or prove. I no longer chased validation like a thirsty traveler in a desert. I could just be. I could just breathe. And in that stillness, I found something I had never truly known: contentment. Not the fleeting contentment of achievement or pleasure, but the steady, quiet contentment of being at peace with what is. I discovered that true happiness does not come from having more, it comes from wanting less. Not because we've given up, but because we've finally understood nothing outside of us can complete what is already whole within. So now, when life becomes heavy, when emotions stir like storm clouds, I no longer ask, why is this happening to me? Instead, I ask, what am I still holding on to? Because I have learned that the deeper the suffering, the tighter the grip. And the tighter the grip, the greater the invitation to let go. This is not a lesson I mastered once and for all. It is a path I return to every day. With each breath, each disappointment, each small joy, I remember, I can meet this moment with open hands. And perhaps that is the greatest freedom, not to escape life, but to live it so gently, so openly, that even sorrow becomes sacred. To no longer be defined by what we carry, but by how lightly we are willing to carry it. To let go not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. To love not out of need, but out of fullness. To live not grasping, not fleeing, but simply, gratefully, here. And in that, I have found a peace that no one can give or take away. Because it was never outside me. It was always waiting just beneath the letting go. Dear friend, if today you find yourself suffering, caught in sorrow, tangled in restlessness, or burdened by a weight you cannot name, pause for a moment. Gently, without judgment, ask yourself, what am I clinging to? A memory? A hope? A version of yourself that no longer exists? Often, it is not the world that binds, thus it is our grasping that tight as the chains. And if, in this very moment, you can let go, even just a little, you may discover something extraordinary. The peace you've been seeking has not abandoned you. It has simply been hidden beneath the layers of your holding on. Peace is not something to be achieved, it is something to be remembered. It is here, now, waiting behind the breath. So let this be your invitation, not to run, not to fight, but to soften, to open, to release. Because sometimes, the light we search for in temples and scriptures is found in the simplest gesture, the courage to let go. If this teaching touched something deep within you, I invite you to share your reflection in the comments below. Your journey matters, and your voice may be the light someone else needs to hear. And if you feel called to walk further along this path of awakening, presence, and inner freedom, I welcome you to subscribe to the Space Lotus of Dharma, where each video is a step back home to the stillness within. Namo Buddhaya.